The influence of family background on relationship patterns. Many previous studies have shown that skilled and educated women have fewer children. By comparing twins and close siblings in Swedish register data, we show that the negative association between human capital and fertility mostly reflects family background factors. For males, human capital measures are unrelated to fertility in the overall population, but this again masks the influence of family background factors, as high-skilled males tend to have more children than their less skilled twins or siblings. Hence, family background factors have a strong negative impact on the overall association between human capital measures and fertility for both women and men. Non-cognitive abilities deviate from these patterns. These abilities remain strongly complementary to fertility both within and across families. Our results can be reconciled with a stylized model where family-specific preferences for fertility are shared across generations and shape investments in skills and traits when children are young. If pursuing higher education makes it more costly to raise a family, then individuals may be forced to choose between accumulating more human capital and raising children. A fear that appears relevant for career-oriented women in many countries. On the other hand, human capital may be complementary to fertility if it increases attractiveness on the marriage market relative to competing peers. At the same time, a separate, but equally large, literature has documented that human capital indicators, family values, and other key determinants of social and economic outcomes are shared within families and transmitted across generations. These patterns naturally raise questions regarding the extent to which associations between education and fertility are artifacts of transmitted family traits, and how such a transmission process is best understood. Family-based skill endowments, but also wealth and preferences, may affect both the possibilities of pursuing higher education and fertility outcomes. In this paper, we present the most comprehensive evidence yet on the role of shared family background for shaping the associations between skills, education, and fertility outcomes. We also provide a stylized theoretical framework that can explain the empirical patterns we unravel. We analyze the role of family background for fertility outcomes of both men and women using data from Swedish population-wide intergenerational registers. We link to those data a very broad set of human capital measures covering years of schooling, compulsory school grades, cognitive ability, and non-cognitive ability, all drawn from Swedish register data. Key to our analysis is that our intergenerational registers allow us to isolate pairs of twins or close siblings who share a joint family background. Footnote 2. The bulk of the existing literature has found negative associations between fertility and education, at least for females. Footnote 3. But this, raw, empirical association is likely to be confounded by predetermined factors, such as skill endowments, preferences, and wealth, that may affect both the pursuit of higher education and fertility outcomes. As we conjecture that an important set of confounders are shared within families, we aim to provide a detailed assessment of how family background affects the associations between education, skills, and fertility. The aim is to isolate the full impact of a shared family background without restricting the analysis to dimensions that are measurable in available data. Footnote 4. Empirically, we therefore follow in the tracks of a set of recent studies that removed the confounding impact of family background by controlling for family fixed effects when regressing fertility measures on education. The evidence from these studies is mixed, perhaps partly because of small sample sizes. But the overall pattern tends to suggest that the inclusion of family fixed effects reduces the negative association between education and fertility. Several papers have relied on compulsory schooling reforms to directly estimate the causal impact of education on female fertility. However, the results are mixed, and the lack of statistical precision makes the approach less useful for our purposes, as it makes it difficult to precisely isolate the role of family background factors. A related set of studies have directed attention to the association between initial skill endowments, mainly intelligence, and fertility, thus focusing on the impact on fertility of endowments that are predetermined at the time when schooling and fertility choices are made. Generally, the above studies document a negative association between intelligence and fertility for women and a relationship close to zero for men. In a recent paper, Koch and Barkley, 2019, find a positive relationship between skills and fertility for men after controlling for family background factors. Footnote 5. In this paper, we combine elements of these earlier approaches, but with a sharper focus on the role of family background factors instead of the causal impact as such. This focus relates our study to the enormous literature on how shared family factors that affect individual outcomes are transmitted across generations. A large number of empirical studies document that families share, within and across generations, fundamental traits and outcomes such as cognitive and non-cognitive abilities, educate, family values, and criminal behavior, just to name a few. But to the best of our knowledge, this literature, which also inspired a set of theoretical models to explain the underlying processes, has not scrutinized the extent to which shared family traits shape the joint distribution of human capital, education, and fertility. We analyze how family background affects the relationships between skills and fertility and between educational attainment and fertility using twin and sibling fixed effects models. An advantage relative to most previous fertility studies is that we are able to use nationwide register data on several different measures of human capital. These measures cover standard outcomes related to completed education and fertility footnote 6, as well as skill endowments in the form of grades and cognitive and non-cognitive abilities measured before family formation and entry into further education. One unique feature of the data is the possibility of precisely estimating the relation between fertility and cognitive and non-cognitive ability within male twin pairs. This is a novel contribution in its own right, in particular as non-cognitive abilities otherwise mostly tend to be available in small-scale survey data sets that do not allow for the inclusion of family fixed effects. We show that these non-cognitive abilities are less related to educational performance than cognitive abilities, but instead matter more for family formation outcomes. Overall, we are able to give a very comprehensive picture of the role played by family background factors in forming the relations between skills, education, and fertility for men and women. Our results highlight that family background is a key determinant of the raw empirical associations between human capital measures and fertility. For women, we find significant negative raw associations between years of schooling, compulsory school grades, and fertility, as in most previous studies. However, after accounting for twin or sibling fixed effects, the associations are close to zero. For men, the raw associations between human capital, years of schooling, compulsory school grades, and cognitive skills, and fertility are close to zero, but after accounting for twin or sibling fixed effects, estimates become positive. Overall, we thus conclude that the raw associations overemphasize, relative to the within-family associations, the degree to which human capital accumulation crowds out childbearing for women. The raw associations similarly underestimate the degree of complementarity between human capital and fertility for men. These patterns imply that there must exist some important family background factor, shared between twins and siblings, that is positively related to grades, cognitive abilities, and acquired education but negatively related to our fertility measures, consequently pushing the raw associations in a negative direction, for both men and women. With respect to non-cognitive ability, which has not been studied in the previous literature and which we show to be very strongly positively related to fertility, we instead find the opposite pattern. The inclusion of twin fixed effects pushes the association with fertility in a more negative direction. We end the paper by showing that all of these patterns can be reconciled in a stylized theoretical model where shared preferences within a family are allowed to affect both the types of skills children accumulate and the choices these children make later in life. We postulate, in line with our empirical patterns, that cognitive skills are relatively more important for schooling, whereas non-cognitive skills are more important for marriage and fertility. If you find this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.